Yeah. One.
Testing audio, 1, 2.
Can you hear me? One.
Committee will come to order. Thank you, members, and welcome. The purpose of this meeting today is to take public comments on the congressional maps that are thus far available on the House and Senate Committee redistricting websites under member-submitted maps on each respective chamber's site. We have two sites that we will also be taking comment today. We have had 36 individuals who have signed up to speak. I will call them in the order in which they have signed up to speak. Each speaker will be allowed 2 minutes to speak. I will begin by announcing our Sergeant-at-Arms that are here with us today in Raleigh, and then I will go to the other two sites and allow them to introduce the Sergeant-at-Arms that are there at those sites. With the House of Representatives here, we have Terry McCraw. Probably behind me, over here. That's coming in. Ray Cook. That's coming here. Warren Hawkins in the back. John Enlow. Rod Fuller in the back. And Chris Moore. And join us. We will then go to UNC Wilmington. If we could check in with you, hear from you, and let you introduce the Sergeant-at-Arms that are there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Representative Carson Smith. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you well.
Great. Thank you. Today from the House, Sergeant of Arms, we've got Jonas Cherry and Stafford Young. And from the Senate, Linda Matthews and Cherie Hedrick. And we've also got two the General Assembly police officers here, Sergeant Kane and Officer Jones.
Thank you very much. And next at Caldwell Community College, if you would please check in with us and introduce your Sergeant-at-Arms.
Get it, Senator Daniel. Our Sergeant-at-Arms are Dwight Green, David Layton, Teresa Ferguson, and we have two GA police officers, Sergeant Barkhofer and Officer Krasuski.
Thank you very much, Senator Daniels. So again, we will go through the list we have and the order in which individuals signed up. They also signed up for a site, so as we come to someone who has signed up to be at an additional site, we will recognize them there. So the first sign up is Tyler, I believe it is Beall, that is supposed to be in the Legislative Auditorium.
Mr. Chair, could I ask a question before we get started?
If you'll suspend for just a minute, but we are not anticipating questions, but go ahead.
I was just trying to get some clarity on whether signups are limited to either 25 or 30 per location, or if everyone here today who has come to speak will be heard. What is the chair's expectation on that?
The sign up will be limited to the 36 individuals who have signed up online in order to speak. It is now closed, and those that have signed up will be recognized to speak. Wow. So, thank you. Tyler?
Still coming in for
2 minutes.
Timer somewhere? Oh, you. Perfect. Hello, my name is Jonathan Tyler Beall. As a lifelong resident of the Triad, I witnessed and was impacted by the racial and partisan gerrymandering that took place at the campus of NCA&T. Done with surgical precision, the nation's largest HBCU had its campus split in half, which made these maps worse than 99.9% of all other available maps. While the currently proposed ones don't appear to be as egregious, there are still serious shortcomings when it comes to districts being congruent, which Webster does define as having similar shapes or interests. Having attended the public hearing in Forsyth and spoken with other citizens across the Triad since, here are some areas of improvement we'd like to remind you of during our previous discussions. We ask that the Piedmont Triad retain our congressional voice and that the three major cities, Winston-Salem, High Point, and Greensboro, remain as congruent and compact as possible. The map CBK3, CMT9, and CST9 intentionally separates all three of those major cities and should be sent back to the drawing board to specifically work on the compactness and congruency of those districts. As currently proposed, this will dilute minority and urban citizens while breaking up practical business, medical, transportation, and educational networks. Rural voters also deserve to maintain the integrity of their interests, as gerrymandering ultimately creates the hyper-partisan political atmosphere that we currently find ourselves in. At this point, I honestly think that the proposed CBK format does the best job of safeguarding voter integrity. Here's a highlight of some of the issues we have found so far. CBK3, submitted by Senator Daniels, forgot the definition of congruent and compact. It gerrymanders in District 7, District 9, District 10, and District 11. CMT 9, submitted by Senator Hayes, is definitely the worst map drawer here. It is not congruent in Districts 2, 7, or 11. And then CST2, submitted by Senator Daniels, is also not congruent or compact with gerrymandering in District 7, 9, 10, and 11. Please make sure you guys are trying to keep these congruent interests as compact as possible so that all of our citizens get the right to vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Kurt Arhart, which is signed up to be here at the Legislative Auditorium. Kurt, you're recognized for a time not to exceed 2 minutes.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Kurt Earhart. I live in North Raleigh, have for 15 years. And I'm here to just speak for maintaining meaningful communities of interest as we draw these maps. I see my community of interest as including Raleigh, Holly Springs, Durham, Chapel Hill. Similar demographics, closely linked. People commute back and forth, shop back and forth, socialize back and forth. Similar political mixes, similar demographics. It just makes a lot of sense. Now, we have to split Wake County, I recognize that. We have to keep it down to about 750,000 people. But I feel this can be done while preserving the triangle community of interest. A map that I saw that I kind of like, I didn't draw this, but what it does is it keeps of the vast bulk of Wake County all together, and the remaining bits of Wake County are then combined with Durham and the southern reaches of Granville County. Makes a lot of sense to me. I think that the two legislators, the two Congress people that came out of there would fairly represent my interest in voting access, gun control, reproductive rights, environmental action, improved health insurance, equal treatment. I saw one map, CBK3, which I didn't like the looks of because it took Holly Springs, carved it away, and combined it with rural counties like Lee, Chatham, Alamance, Randolph, and beyond. So I'm just here to ask that the triangle community of interest be preserved. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next, we have Jenny Katora Lynch, which is also at the signed up for the auditorium. Jenny Katora Lynch. I'm assuming is not present. Last chance. Okay. Susan B. McClanahan has signed up for here at the Legislative Auditorium. Ma'am, you're recognized for a time not to exceed 2 minutes.
I am Susan B. McClanahan from Orange County. North Carolina is a 50-50 state, and fair maps should reflect that. The Princeton Gerrymandering Project has graded congressional maps CBK3, CMT9, CST2, Senate map SST4, and House map HBK11. Every one of these received an F grade because they all provide Republicans with a significant advantage. If any of these maps are used, we will not have free elections in North Carolina because you have already predetermined the outcome. In Congress, we will have 9 to 12 Republicans out of 14. Gross gerrymandering occurs when a candidate wins 55% or more of the vote. Over the last decade, David Price won our 4th congressional district by between 67 and 74%. In the new maps, Orange, Durham, and part of Wake would make a new congressional district. By joining us with Wake, you are diluting urban voices because the most populated areas are the easiest to gerrymander. Wake should only be divided into 2 districts. In SST 4, you have gerrymandered Senator Valerie Fushiba, comprising her district of Orange Person Caswell, rather than the current Orange-Chatham partnership. In 2017, when you tried to gerrymander North Carolina judicial districts, local judges wrote to object, saying that splitting Orange and Chatham would disrupt a fully functioning system and cause confusion and unnecessary complications. Residents of Orange and Chatham counties are more connected by work, commerce, and recreation than those with other counties. Please keep Orange and Chatham together. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next up, we have Kathy Greggs with the Fayetteville Pact and here in the auditorium. You're recognized, ma'am, for a time not to exceed 2 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing us to be here again. We do appreciate us, being able to come again and have addressed the issue of redistricting, but obviously, based on the maps, no one listened to us the first time. So the fact that you're making a mockery of the people is just so embarrassing. For you all to come here and tell us that the maps that you draw, you had no idea you was going to draw them. And Senator Clark, I'm very disappointed in you being an Army veteran that made the map only so you can run for Congress. Let's make sure we not sit here and BS with the people, Let's really get some work done, because this is straight up BS. You allowed the people to come here and speak, and you chose not to do what the people wanted. Once again, we're going back into the courtroom because you have to wait and sit up here and take taxpayer money because you don't want to address the real issues. Like the fact we still have a lieutenant governor that don't want to address LGBTQ. I say we vote all y'all out, you go home, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Caitlin Metzger, with no affiliation, also asked to speak in the legislative auditorium. Thank you, ma'am. You're recognized for a time period not to exceed 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Caitlin Metzger. I live in Durham. I'm a lifelong North Carolinian and have lived in several places across the state, but here today to talk about myself as a voter in Durham County. Two main things. One, I do not believe that you have listened to the input from voters so far. I did my best to follow along the process online. I did my best to watch what was happening at the previous hearings in September. I did my best to read through the thousands of comments that went through the online portal. When I look at the draft maps that I see on your website, which is too hard to use, it is clear to me that you did not listen to the people, and you have not taken in the input of the people that you requested to hear from. First of all, the triad needs to be in one district. Stop cracking and packing people of color into different districts. Second of all, the Sandhills region asked specifically to be in one district. I know there's multiple draft maps, so I don't know exactly which one you're considering, but from what I could see from the draft maps, you did not listen to that feedback as well. The other thing that I want to bring up is a little bit more about the process here today. It is 3 p.m. on a Monday. And I know personally that I have friends and family who texted me thinking that they signed up for today, but got the link to do the virtual later. So I just want to say it was not easy to sign up. It was not easy to get here. It was only announced a few days ago. It is inaccessible, and that is your choice. You're doing that on purpose. The last thing I want to speak about is we have a new congressional district. That should be exciting for North Carolinians. More representation in DC means more people fighting for us and what we want, which is better public schools, Medicaid expansion, clean air, clean water, better funding for our HBCUs and community colleges. These are the things that we want to see from Congress. Instead, we're going to be litigating and paying for your mistakes once again.
Thank you for your comments. Next up, I have Diane Young-Pava in the auditorium. Thank you, ma'am. You're recognized for a time period not to exceed 2 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Diana Young-Paiva. I'm a citizen of Wake County. I've lived in North Carolina for almost my entire life. I wasn't born here, but lived here most of my life. Thank you for the opportunity to be here in person and also providing opportunities for people to participate remotely and virtually. I I agree with the previous speaker, that it's a little hard to follow the process, but thank you for making the opportunity available regardless. I too have been following the redistricting process with great interest and attended one of the previous public hearings at Durham Tech. And the stakes are high. For many of you, it's a matter of winning and losing, but for the citizens of North Carolina, it's a matter of our lives and things that matter to us. So I hope we can avoid a repeat of the last decade of hyper-partisanship and court case after court case. We're a fairly evenly split state, and running out of time, I got to get to my most important points. Okay, so I've looked at the maps that are online, the congressional maps. In particular, there's only one draft each for the NC Senate and NC House, but for the congressional maps, I felt like the CBK4 and CBK5 maps that were submitted by Senator Clark are the most fair when you look at competitiveness, proportionality, compactness, splitting, and minority. This is my main point. I really would like to know how you are going to be processing the comments that you all have received to date. I don't see at what point you will be reviewing those before the votes are taken. I know that the public access comment input policy requires that a summary be provided to you all, but I hope that everyone will get ample time to review the comments that have been submitted before you vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. I will remind future speakers the purpose of this meeting is to take public comments on the congressional maps that are thus far available. Next up, signed up, we have Kathy Wheeler, who is also signed up for the Legislative Auditorium. You're recognized for a time period.
Good afternoon. My name is Kathy Wheeler, and I live in Guilford County. My comments here relate to the proposed congressional maps. In maps drawn by Republican members, Greensboro, Winston-Salem, and High Point are split across multiple districts. Currently, these three urban areas are in one district since we are together a community under one name, the Triad, and share services and have common needs. In proposed maps, these three areas are separated and put into different districts where their needs are not similar to the needs of the rest of the district. For example, Greensboro in one map is included with areas to the west where there are no common interests. So some constituents in such a district will lose out. Maps also put these three urban areas in with substantially large rural areas. The result will likely be Democratic votes formerly together in one district being diluted by the larger number of Republicans. Mecklenburg and Wake counties were also divided in different ways with the same negative impact. District maps should not give partisan advantage, but of North Carolina's 14 congressional seats, according to analyses, these maps make at least 9 and up to 12 seats out of a total of 14 safe for Republicans. This is not fair since North Carolina is a half-and-half state with the two parties. The maps proposed by Republican members dilute Democratic votes and deprive communities of effective representation. They do not get high marks from several analyses, including the Princeton Gerrymandering Project. I ask that you draw new maps and adhere to all criteria, stay nonpartisan, and also consider the maps drawn by Democratic members which do not have the issues above. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Next up, we have Francis Sokolowski. You have the floor for a time period not to exceed 2 minutes.
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Frank Sokolowski. I live in Fuquay-Varina, where I consider myself a member of the greater Research Triangle community. I'm here to call for the acceptance of fair legal maps and to express my concern that the process so far has been difficult to engage with. I'm lucky to have enough advantages in my life that I can be here today. It was not easy to afford to make this comment. I'm sure many who share my concerns were simply unable to muster the necessary resources to be here to give such a comment on such short notice. The material provided to prepare for this hearing was given too late, was hard to find, and lacks considerable detail and context about how and why the maps were drawn the way they were. My family moved to North Carolina some years ago before the pandemic to be closer to our extended family and to access high-quality education and healthcare, to name a few. Those things are ultimately what brought me here today. And redistricting directly affects funding for education. We all want the best opportunities for our children. Redistricting directly affects funding for healthcare. We all want access to quality hospitals and specialists. And redistricting directly affects the abilities of communities to get the representation they deserve. We all want our communities to be heard. So I ask, please approve fair and legal maps. In approving these maps, please analyze racial data as made clear in Cooper v. Harris to draw these equitable and constitutional maps. And please provide the details and context around your decision making. Further, I ask, how can you accept this process that lacks so much transparency? And why is it okay to force North Carolinians into districts that do not represent their community? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next up, we have Deborah Maxwell with the new Hanover County NAACP, which should be at the UNC Wilmington site. So UNC Wilmington, if Deborah Maxwell is there, please feel free to recognize her for a time recognize them for a time not to exceed 2 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, this is Representative Smith, Wilmington. I know it's really hard to see where the speaker's set up, but she is not present here.
Thank you. We will move on. Next, we have Andy Jackson with the John Locke Foundation, who has signed up to speak here in the auditorium.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you today. The criteria that the Joint Redistricting Committee approved are good for assuring that districts you eventually will approve will reflect the character of the areas that you're going to be representing, particularly the congressional districts. While in my estimation, I haven't seen any of the current list of congressional districts that will pass muster in the end, I'm confident that this committee will do that using the criteria you laid out, and particularly the ban on using racial data, which is especially important for making sure that racial considerations do not predominate in designating districts. On a process note, while hearings like this are an important part of the redistricting process, organizations are trying to use that process to train people on how to testify at public hearings. Nothing illegal, nothing wrong with that. Those groups are seeking to salt hearing records to bring a public record for lawsuits against any districts the General Assembly passes. One group in particular is seeking to use redistricting hearings as a tool for future litigation. The organization On the Line is a wholly owned project of the National Redistricting Action Fund, a 501c4 that functions as the advocacy and lobbying arm of Eric Holder's National Democratic Redistricting Committee. This is not conjecture. One of the leaders of the North Carolina project of On the Line have publicly stated that they want to have testimony in public records that they can, and I quote, be impactful during any future litigation. Of course, we all have the right to form organizations to help instruct members of the General Assembly. However, let's not pretend that the comments presented at these hearings are representative of the general public. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next up, we have Elin Stevens, who is signed up at UNC Wilmington. If Stevens is there, please recognize them for a time not to exceed 2 minutes.
I'm facing that way. Okay. Thank you very much for the time. My name is Elin Stevens. I am a resident of Wilmington, North Carolina. Thank you very much for making this hearing available for individuals. However, I must note it's at 3 p.m. and I'm late, And I'm glad that I kept my spot because I had meetings around to get here today. So having more meetings at more accessible times would be great. My other comments on the actual redistricting maps that I have seen are that I have seen at least one congressional map that splits off landfall and other high wealth areas of the city away from pretty much the rest of the city. And I believe that New Hanover County, and especially the city of Wilmington, needs to be kept whole. We are one community. The other thing is I was speaking with some members of the military earlier, and they expressed strong dismay at the fact that Onslow County was being divided. They feel that the military community has a right to be heard as a unit, and the military community puts their lives on the line on behalf of the rest of the United States, and they deserve to have their voice held preserved. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your comments. Next up, we have Brian Mathis with the organization Mathis for Wake County here at the Legislative Building. Thank you, sir. You're recognized for a time not to exceed 2 minutes.
Great. Thank you. Good morning or good afternoon. My name is Brian Mathis. I'm a civic engagement educator here in Wake County, as well as candidate for Wake County Board of Commissioners. Now, as I was driving into work today, WUNC had a news story and replayed the now infamous quotes from then Representative Hall about, Representative Lewis about redrawing the maps to give a partisan advantage to Republicans. As we know, in 2019, North Carolina Superior Court ruled that this to be unconstitutional because the districts drawn did not permit voters to freely choose their representatives, but rather representatives are choosing voters based on sophisticated partisanship sorting. I would be hopeful that our leaders in the state legislature would prioritize fairness in our congressional districts, as well as state, House, and Senate in 2021, but so far that has yet to be seen. The Princeton Gerrymandering Project, which I've had the pleasure of working with a few interns on that project, have scored multiple members submitted maps on partisan fairness, competitiveness, and geographic features. Only 3 maps have received an overall grade of an A. Those are Congressional Map CBK 4 and 5 from Senator Clark and CST 6 from Senator Chaudhry. Out of the other 6 maps that were submitted and scored by the Princeton Gerrymandering Project, they've received an F or a C. As an educator, these grades are not good. As a citizen, these grades are disappointing and frustrating. It's clear that Republican members of our state legislature have not taken seriously the rulings of our courts, and more importantly, the demands of everyday North Carolinians to enjoy our state constitutional right for free and fair elections and the ability to choose our representatives. I implore this committee and our state legislature to do right by the people of North Carolina and adopt maps that are fair, and a government that is built by the people in power to hold on that power is not a democracy. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next, we have Eilett Colston, signed up here in the auditorium. A-Y-L-E-T-T, Colston. Second time. Final chance, did not show. Phyllis Demko with the League of Women Voters of North Carolina, also signed up here in the auditorium.
Hi, I'm Phyllis Demko, represent the League of Women Voters of North Carolina. Thank you very much for letting me speak today. The League believes that the congressional maps drawn by majority members will significantly disadvantage minority voters. The map labeled CBK3 would be the least troublesome, but even it jeopardizes the ability of Black voters in eastern North Carolina to elect a candidate of their choice. This committee has persisted in saying that race will not be considered as a criterion in redistricting. Perhaps, as the media have suggested, you chose not to include race as a criterion because you think it will protect you from litigation over racial gerrymandering. Being colorblind does not equate to being racially just. In fact, it can mean just the opposite. But we believe that you really have considered race. The federal court in the Covington case, which ruled against you, stated, Redistricting legislatures will almost always be aware of racial demographics, even without an analysis of racial data. Of course you are aware. You are aware of where your voters of color reside, and you are aware of how they vote. And that makes it easy, without statistics, for you to pack and crack us. We think you are being disingenuous by saying you do not consider race. To serve your goal of staying in power, you do not need to analyze racially polarized voting. You just need to make it appear that you haven't. We urge you to consider the substance, not the appearance of what you're doing. North Carolinians are tired of lawsuits and your ploys to stay decisions in order to delay long enough to get your preferred candidates elected from unconstitutional districts. This kind of bad faith is a frightening challenge to our democracy. We are asking you, be a part of positive change, and once more, earn the respect of those in this state who revere a truly representative form of government. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next, Jennifer Bremer, who is signed up here in the auditorium. Jennifer Bremer. May be recognized for a time not to exceed 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Bremer, and I'm an Orange County voter. I'd like to speak to you about a topic near and dear to my heart, the importance of keeping our communities whole as you draw our districts. I'd like to focus in particular on our cities and towns. North Carolina remains one of our most rural states, but our towns and cities are growing rapidly. They're vital to our prosperity and quality of life. By keeping them whole, you can provide our citizens with better representation. In preparation for these remarks, I took a detailed look at how our cities and towns are divided across 5 of the congressional maps, 2 drawn by Senator Daniel and 1 each by Senators Clark and Hayes and Representative Hall. These maps differ quite markedly in which towns they divide and how they do it. Some towns and cities cross county lines, but they could still be kept whole without doing violence to the principle of keeping counties together. Wherever possible, such as in Chapel Hill and Mebane in my home county, keeping each town in 1 congressional district would help voters make their voices heard. It would also be easy to achieve. Senator Daniel's map in particular divides only 11 towns by my count, while other maps chop up as many as 33. Charlotte is the only town too large for a single district, but it does not need to be fractured across 3 or even 4 congressional districts, as most of these maps do. There is even less rationale for splitting Greensboro, High Point, and Winston-Salem, but most of these maps chop them up nonetheless. Even small towns that don't cross county lines are cut up, such as Hope Mills, Louisville, and Lillington. There's really no good reason to divide cities and towns. As you finalize the map, please keep our towns and cities whole so that our voters, business people, families, and all of our urban residents have a single congressperson who represents them in Washington. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next up, we have Lewis Carson, signed up to speak here in the auditorium. I believe I was told by the Sergeant at Arms staff he may be outside. So, recognized for a time period not to exceed 2 minutes.
Hello, my name is Lewis Carson. I'm proud to say that I've been a North Carolina resident for over 50 years. I've lived in the same community with the same values for over 10 years. The state's redistricting processes have placed me in 3 different congressional districts in those 10 years. In my view, the 2021 process that the legislature has used to determine districts is flawed. The criteria for map making were quickly adopted with inadequate discussion and time for public comment. The criteria of not using racial data is disingenuous because there are criteria, data items, and knowledge to substitute for that racial data, which may have discriminatory effects. Maps CST2, CBA2, CBK3, and CMT9 appear to result in reduced or no minority representation. Furthermore, the public hearings on redistricting, which will impact all voters for the next decade, are limited to 4 for the entire state of North Carolina. The number of speakers is limited to 25 or 30 people per site. Furthermore, the maps were only published a few days before these hearings, giving the public very little time to study them. Although the public was offered the opportunity to draw maps, the website videos of proceedings on the terminals at the legislature are obscured. The screens are too far away to read, the people's voices are unclear, the process is indistinct. The current criteria address important considerations, but the process that the legislature has adopted to implement them in drawing maps deprives the people of North Carolina of an equal opportunity to have a meaningful say in the electoral system. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next up, we have Nina Day with the North Carolina Association of Educators, signed up here in the auditorium.
Actually, I'm speaking on my behalf, and one thing I would ask is there a place when you sign up for just a citizen to say a citizen? Because that almost kept me from speaking with you today. But I'm speaking as myself. I am Nina Morley Day. I am a proud retired public education teacher here in North Carolina, 38 and a half years. And I urge you to do the right thing here. Our young people are watching. They see what we do. Set a good example. I live in Hillsborough, North Carolina, and I have voted every year that I could vote since I registered in Fayetteville. I would like to ask you to set these congressional district maps such as CST6, CBK5, CBK4. These are the main points. Keep the metropolitan areas together. We all know what parts of North Carolina work and live and travel and do business together. Keep those together. Keep the triad together. Growing up in Fayetteville, I would like to also support the Sandhills Consortium, the group that would like to have one congressional district for the Sandhills. And the main thing, I would just ask you to fully consider what's at stake here. We really want to make sure every person in North Carolina has the right to vote and is able to vote. And so with these districts, the other thing I would ask for is basically, this is now in favor of the state, Senate, and House. I agree with my speaker that spoke earlier. Please keep Orange and Chatham County together. There are many things that are going on that are very excellent in that community together, so keep us together. And we have much more in common in Hillsborough with counties, or Durham County and Chapel Hill, than we do with the counties to the north of us, so please keep that in mind. Finally, I would just like to say, please set a new day for North Carolina. Don't let your redistricting legacy be one that continues gerrymandering. Set a map that doesn't require a court fight. Use that money for something that makes North Carolina a better place. Thank you for the time.
Thank you for your comments. Next up, I have signed up Michael Rush with the Brunswick County Democrat Party, signed up to speak at UNC Wilmington. If they are there, please recognize them for a time not to exceed 2 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Mike Rush. I am the third vice chair of the Brunswick County Democratic Party, and I'm speaking today on behalf of Eric Terashima, our county chair, who had a scheduling conflict and could not attend. The following are our comments regarding the congressional district maps, state senate maps, and state house maps. Congressional district maps. In terms of meeting the critical factors of proportionality, competitiveness, compactness, splitting, and minority representation, the best proposal is clearly CBK5. North Carolina is essentially evenly split between Republican and Democratic voters, so maps should not be engineered to purposely deviate from this reality. CS2 is a classic case of gerrymandering. As far as our area is concerned, the proposed District 2 reaches down and takes a chunk out of Wilmington from District 3, and it's just another in a long line of shameful attempts by the Republican Party here in North Carolina to dilute the minority vote. Frank.
I'm not sure if we've lost audio contact or if something's happened, but we can no longer hear the site at Wilmington.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay. In the case of SS2T4, the proposed District 7, a core section of urban Wilmington has been blatantly inserted into the mix with rural Brunswick and Columbus counties. So one has to ask the obvious question, why does the Republican Party continue in its attempts to dilute the minority vote? The answer is simple. The proposed map
would likely result in a 29-21 split between Republicans and Democrats, again underrepresenting the actual strength of Democratic voters in North Carolina. Finally, in reference to the State House maps, HBK 11 fails the test of competitiveness and proportionality. It would likely result in a 69-51 split favoring Republicans. District 21 ignores a hard geographical barrier, the Cape Fear River, by including the Carolina Beach area on the north side of the river with some of the coastal areas in Brunswick County on the south side of the river. The only thing Carolina Beach and New Hanover County and the coastal areas in Brunswick County have in common is that they are being used to give the Republicans a competitive edge.
Thank you. And next up, we have James Abelard, who represents the NHC. I think that's New Hanover County Democrat Party. And they are also signed up to speak at the UNC Wilmington site. If they are there, you may recognize them for a time period not to exceed 2 minutes.
My name's James Abelard. I live in the western part of Wilmington and in the county of New Hanover. I've been here for 9 years, moved from Alexandria, Virginia, and we are in close relationship with other parts of our city, except for a diminished contacts with the people in our precinct W3, which is in the middle part of the city. In order to continue the idea of drawing fair maps that allow people in communities to be represented by leaders who know their communities and who will fight for needed resources to solve communities' issues and promote jobs and sustainability, we think, and I think, that the W03 precinct should be restored to District 9. And it's not shown that way on any of the maps that I've seen so far. So accordingly, along with Mr. Rush and Ms. Stevens, who've spoken before me, we think 10 years of experimentation with the way things have been drawn is enough. And we ask you to uncrack precinct W03. Uncrack precinct W03.
Thank you for your comment. Next up, we have Paul Taylor with the National Black Leadership Caucus, North Carolina, 8th Congressional District, signed up to speak here in the Legislative Auditorium. Second call for Paul Taylor. We'll let the Sergeant at Arms see he may be outside. Mr. Taylor, you're recognized for a time period not to exceed 2 minutes.
My name is Paul Taylor, and I'm speaking on the redistricting. And my thought is, it seemed as though that the legislature or the committee have not really heard what the people have to say. I believe all of y'all and women are honest men and women. And with that being said, that let's do the right thing. Let's let our community have the vote and redistrict this thing so that everyone have a fair shake at what's going on and how we vote. Not you guys and ladies determine to vote for us. You're taking the right away from the people. We deserve to vote our hearts, our mind, and our conscience, and not be decided by the people I'm in front of. It's just not right. Thank you, and that's all I got.
Thank you for your comments. I will ask that the committee room will remain in order. So coming in, next up we have Aaron Hope, who has signed up to speak here in the auditorium. I'll ask the Sergeant at Arms to check and see if Aaron Hope is outside as well. He's out there? No, no one's out there. Okay, final call, Aaron Hope, no show. Victoria Shea, who has signed up to speak at the auditorium here. Thank you. You're recognized for a time period not to exceed 2 minutes.
I'm Victoria Shea from Chatham County. I'm speaking as an individual, but I'm also an active member of the Chatham units of the League of Women Voters and the NAACP. I'm appalled at how blatantly the redistricting committees have ignored or attempted to suppress input from the public. The number of hearings before drawing the maps was too limited, the county groupings were insidious in their partisan and racial intent, and the skimpiness of information about these hearings was disgraceful. The maps and notice of today's hearings have been available for only 5 days. The maps themselves were not labeled in a way that makes them understandable to the general public, such as CBK3 or SST-4 Stat Pack. And the number of speaking slots was heavily restricted. Today's hearing was apparently even further restricted. Monday is for comments only on the congressional map. Tuesday is for the state and state Senate. Well, I didn't organize a carpool and drive all this way and find a parking place in downtown Raleigh not to tell you how unfair the published House maps are for Chatham County. These maps propose to attach 3 precincts in Randolph County onto the Chatham House District. Doing so would put the number of voters in Chatham's district at nearly 5% over the ideal size, and Chatham County is growing quickly, so we will soon surpass that legal threshold. Chatham Park in Pittsboro has begun to build what will soon be thousands of homes on their 7,000 acres, and at least half a dozen additional developments have been submitted to the Chatham Planning Board. There is no statistical or legal reason to add all 3 Randolph districts to Chatham's district. Randolph precincts to Chatham's district. I urge you not to include Randolph County's Providence precinct, which of the 3 is geographically the farthest from Chatham. Doing so would dilute the voices of Chatham voters for no legitimate reason. Do not include Randolph County's Providence precinct in the district with Chatham. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next up, we have Linda Archer, signed up to speak here in the auditorium. Thank you, ma'am. You have recognized for a time not to exceed 2 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Linda Archer. I live in Guilford County. My neighborhood is just north of I-40, and it abuts Forsyth County. I would like to make 3 points about my neighborhood. Number 1, the people of my neighborhood overwhelmingly work in either Greensboro or Winston-Salem. We shop in Greensboro or Kernersville. Our doctors are in Greensboro or Winston-Salem. Our kids go to school in Greensboro. We are not a rural area. Number 3, my neighborhood is growing and changing. We have added numerous industries and warehouses just in the 6 years that I have lived there. Subdivisions are added at a regular pace. We have the concerns and problems of an urban or suburban area. As far as the maps that have been released, CBK3, CMT9, and CS2 all have similar problems. They include my neighborhood with a small portion of Guilford County and maybe a small corridor through Forsyth, and then take off into parts unknown somewhere out in the rural areas of the state that do not have anything in the way of common issues and concerns. I feel it is obvious that Guilford and Forsyth counties are being split in such a way as to reduce our urban voice. That does not serve the people. We are called the Piedmont Triad for a reason and should be treated as such. The outcome of passing any of these 3 maps will be that we will have to endure lawsuit after lawsuit again, and the taxpayers will once again pay for these lawsuits with money better spent on health care or our schools. I urge you to consider map CBK4.
Thank you for your comments. Next up, we have Joel Gallagher with the indivisible Guilford County, who is asked to speak at the auditorium. Thank you, sir. You're recognized for a time period not to exceed 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Joel Gallagher, and I'm commenting specifically on the U.S. Congressional draft maps. I'm with Indivisible Guilford County. My wife, 2 boys, and I have lived in Greensboro for 4 years. I'm a physician, and while I'm based in Cone Health System, I interact with the various hospital systems spread across the Piedmont Triad, including Wake Forest, Brenner Children's, and High Point Medical Center. When I first moved here, the Piedmont Triad was split into 2 U.S. congressional districts. Aside from getting adjusted to a new city, getting to know who represented us in the U.S. House was a challenge. I was clearly not alone, as I could look up who represented me using different online tools and would get 2 different answers despite putting in the same address. Our U.S. representatives did not listen or advocate for the needs of the urban residents. Now Greensboro, as well as the other communities of the Triad, are finally contained in 1 congressional district and were represented in Congress by someone who reflects our needs. There's so much overlap in the area, with residents living in one part of the Triad and commuting to a job in another part. We also share an airport, arts and culture, multiple institutions of higher learning, and even sports teams. Having this region represented by 1 U.S. House member ties the Triad together and just makes sense. Unfortunately, despite many requests from voters to keep the Triad in 1 district, most of the map drafts divide the region into 2 to 3 districts, encompassing far-removed rural communities that do not share the same sets of needs as the anchor cities of the Triad. These sets of maps get poor grades from the Princeton Gerrymandering Project. They also geographically make no sense, with snaking projections dividing counties that are the essence of gerrymandering, which North Carolina residents clearly want ended. Instead, please consider the maps from State Senator Ben Clark or State Senator Chituri, which keep the Piedmont Triad whole. It's also curious what the proposed 14th U.S. House district that's in an area of the state with a rather low population. North Carolina gained another U.S. House seat based on population growth in the cities, notably Wake County, and it makes little sense to put this U.S. House district in an area that actually lost population according to the U.S. Census data. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Next up, we have Evelyn Mabin Hall, which represents, I only have the initials here, UCSD, and is at the Caldwell Community College site. The Union County Senior Democrats is what I've been given by staff. So, Caldwell, if you're there, please feel free to recognize them for a time not to exceed 2 minutes.
Senator Heiss, that individual has not appeared at the Caldwell County site.
They're not there?
They're not there.
Okay, thank you. So it's a no. Next up then, I have Bob Jones, who is signed up here at the auditorium. So coming in not with an organization. Do we have a Bob Jones? No one outside, no one showing third call. We'll have that as a no-show. Angeline Echeverria, that's coming in not with an organization, signed up to speak here at the auditorium. Thank you, ma'am. You're recognized for a time not to exceed 2 minutes.
My name is Angeline Echeverria. I have lived in Brentwood, Raleigh, and been active in the Latino community for more than 9 years. Many of my neighbors are immigrants or, like myself, the children of immigrants. At previous hearings, I and many others requested widespread community education and publicizing of the redistricting process among the Spanish language and other ethnic media, interpretation support for testifying in languages other than English, and more advance notice for public hearings. Instead, the information has been provided only in English, with maps that are not easy to find, nor are they user-friendly, and less than 1 week's notice has been given. I am particularly concerned about maps CMT9, CBK3, and CST2. Each of these maps divides Wake County into 3 separate districts that do not reflect communities of interest and that would result in the county not having any majority-minority representation. According to the 2020 census, Wake has more than 1.1 million residents and more than 10% of the state population. It is a diverse county that is 11.3% Hispanic and 8.6% Asian, and the growth of both of these communities have been propelling population growth across the state. By not taking into account the racial and ethnic data for communities that have historically lacked representation, this process has missed an opportunity to advance racial equity and has disregarded the requests that we made at the hearings previous to this one. In addition to not providing adequate representation for communities of color, these maps would result in disproportionate representation does not reflect the political will of our state. I request that the maps be modified to ensure that Wake County, and specifically Hispanic and Asian communities, are adequately represented. At the same time, I do not want this representation to come at the expense of the hard-fought representation that has been won by African American communities. These maps need to be reconsidered to ensure that African American voting power is not diluted and that other communities of color are also able to elect candidates of their choice. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next up, we have Andrew Silver, representing the Carolina Jews for Justice. Has signed up to speak here in the auditorium. You're recognized for a time not to exceed 2 minutes.
Thank you. I support all the organizations that are opposed to gerrymandering, but really I speak only for myself because my views are a little different. I live in North Durham. I think that Durham and Orange County are overwhelmingly Democratic, so I don't think that there's any way that my area can become anything but Democratic in any of the maps. The problem is that there is too lopsided a margin in this area, so it really should be split to even out the proportion along with surrounding counties like Person, Granville, Wake, and Chatham. I don't think that the proposed maps have tried to do this. When districts are safe for one party or another, elections are decided in the primaries, not the general election. That is a prescription for electing the most extreme candidates of both parties, leading to hyperpartisanship and gridlock. Better to have competitive districts so that elections will be decided in the general election, not the primaries. Then the representatives must be responsive to all their constituents, not just their party base, and we can have better and more responsible government. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next up, we have Michael Kelly, representing the Buncombe County Veterans Treatment Court, is at the site in Caldwell Community College. If Michael Kelly is there, please recognize them for a time not to exceed 2 minutes.
Michael Kelly. Senator Heiss, it doesn't appear that Michael Kelly has appeared for the meeting.
Thank you, Senator Daniels. We will then move on to Kristin Havelick with the New North Carolina Project, representing the New North Carolina Project, who has signed up to speak here in the auditorium. Kristin Havelick, you are recognized for a time period not to exceed 2 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Kristen Hovlick. I was born and raised in Raleigh. My husband and I live in NC2. I'm an organizer, and I'm a part of the New North Carolina Project, which invests in communities of color to expand the electorate and create voters for life. Normally, I'm not the one speaking for the New North Carolina Project, as it is a program directed by two amazing Black women, but today I speak as an ally to our communities of color that have been largely affected by gerrymandering over the last decade. The maps that have been drawn over the last few weeks largely show little to no consideration of the needs that constituents voiced in September before maps started to be drawn. This process is not a game. You cannot pick your own constituents instead of what should be the other way around through our democratic right to vote. Maps like CBK3, CMT9, and CST2 will oppress neighborhoods of color in Wake, Guilford, and Mecklenburg counties by dividing and cornering them into districts that are majority rural and represented by Republicans who have no regard for their lives whatsoever. I ask that you consider using the map CBK4 as it takes into account the urban sprawl from Wake County into Johnson County, as well as Harnett County, which adds in the new congressional district NC14. I also urge you to keep Guilford County whole in the new maps and to more evenly divide Wake and Mecklenburg counties in 2 rather than 3 or 4 districts. CBK4 also won't oppress people of color as harshly as other maps that have been proposed and will still keep Republicans in the majority. We aren't asking for much. We are asking for the bare minimum of a more democratic process, which starts with fair maps. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next up, we have Manuel Diaz, who has signed up to speak at UNC Wilmington. UNC William, if Manuel is there, please recognize them for a time not to exceed 2 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Manuel Mejia Diaz, and I drove 2 hours from Cumberland County as a concerned citizen to thank the North Carolina General Assembly for ignoring the statements made by the people of my county. Despite clear demands from constituents, 5 of the 9 maps proposed by the NCGA this week divide Cumberland County, those being SST4, CMT9, CST2, CBA2, and HBK11. While all the draft maps contain insegmentifications of Charlotte, the Triad, and the Triangle, only one map provides an inset for Cumberland County. The residents of Cumberland County cannot see exactly where the divisions in their community take place. Yet the NCGA expects them to evaluate the maps and make their comments in just 2 days. Multiple tools and platforms exist to present these maps in an interactive format, which would allow people to make more informed and precise comments about the maps. Clearly, the NCGA has no interest in keeping its constituents fully informed. Even though the NCGA didn't read any of the public comments, I have. Ms. Pamela wrote that Moore, Cumberland, Scotland, Hoke, and Robinson should serve as a Sandhills district and not be split. However, several of the proposed maps split these counties. SST4 is an especially bad example. Ms. Sharon lives in Fayetteville and has lived in NC since 1972. She demanded that her city be kept whole and urged the NCGA to appoint a nonpartisan commission to oversee the redistricting process. Based on the maps that were released this week, the NCGA has no interest in drawing fair maps, let alone appointing a commission to do it for them. This entire process shows why Ms. Sharon wants to see the establishment of a nonpartisan commission. This has not been transparent and this has not been accessible to voters. I'm blessed to be here and speak. Representative John Soka, I see you here on the list. Please don't allow them to split Cumberland County.
Thank you for your comments. Next up, we have Sonia Bennetton Patrick, representing the National Black Leadership Caucus, also signed up to speak at UNC Wilmington. If they're at UNC Wilmington, please recognize them for a time not to exceed 2 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Sonia Bennetton Patrick. I reside in New Hanover County. I can trace my family's history here back to the late 1800s. I'm also a daughter of a disabled veteran, and he would be appalled, my father would be appalled if he was here to see what's going on in North Carolina today. My mother's 91 years old. She votes in one of the precincts that you have cut out of and divided and put where she would have no voice along with other African Americans. Here in New Hanover County, this is also the home of the 1898 massacre, the only successful government takeover. After the massacre, the General Assembly in 1898 passed laws of voter suppression to keep African Americans from voting. In 2021, it looks like the General Assembly is trying to do the same thing today, just like they did 10 years ago when the maps were ruled unconstitutional. We ask you, North Carolina, is this the type of leadership and the type of things that you consider fair? This is an issue of morality. Do what is right. We demand fair maps. We're not asking for a lot, just be fair. Is that difficult? Thank you for listening.
Thank you for your comments. Next up, we have Deborah Baroth, also signed up at UNC Wilmington. Apparently, they showed up here. So, Deborah, you are recognized for a time period not to exceed 2 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Debbie Beroth. I'm a native North Carolinian. I've lived in Raleigh for 45 years. I tried to look at the maps being drawn online. You said you wanted it transparent. I don't understand how it could be transparent when you couldn't see what you were doing, you couldn't hear what you were doing, and I got bumped off 5 times. That's not transparent. North Carolina is a 50-50 state, and if the maps are fair, then this is the way they should be drawn, where the likely outcome will be half Republican, half Democrat. That's all we're asking for. The only ones that I could see that were close to this were the ones drawn by Senator Ben Clark. They weren't perfect, but they were closer. Democracy requires every vote to count. The offices should be competitive. Communities should be represented by the person that best serves them. We encourage our young people to vote. We tell them how important it is, and every vote should count. The only way to encourage folks to get out and vote is if there is a chance that the person that they are voting for could possibly win. North Carolina has been in the news for terrible, unfavorable things. It hurts my soul as a native North Carolinian to see this. I would be incredibly proud of this state and you politicians if you could be in the news for having maps that represent the people. You've been given a job to serve the people. Wouldn't it be great to see politicians put aside their own personal interest and put the people first? You know, I believe this is possible. You guys could do a wonderful thing. You could do what's right. That's all we're asking for. We just want what's right and what's fair. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next up, we have William Tarpley with the Chatham County Concerned Citizen, signed up at UNC Wilmington. If they are present at UNC Wilmington, please recognize them for a time period not to exceed 2 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, it appears Mr. Tarpley is not in the auditorium in Wilmington.
As a no-show. Then we have Lynette Ramsey with the ACT Republican Women, signed up to speak at the Caldwell Community College. If they are present at the Caldwell site, please recognize them for a time period not to exceed 2 minutes.
Ms. Ramsey, you're recognized for a period of 2 minutes.
Thank you. The first thing that I just want to say is that the only way that there's not going to be any court battle is if you give the Democrats all the seats. And so we're going to go to court no matter what. But I also want to say that I found it quite easy to find the sign up and find out the location and all that. But I want to talk about the inconsistency. I do agree that there's some craziness and confusion in these maps. For example, I want to talk about my district, the current 5th district. You excluded most of Watauga County in these maps, especially in CST2. Except for 3,700 people on the far edge, that house is where Congresswoman currently lives. And then you went and you skipped all the way over most of Forsyth and you picked up Guilford County. I do agree with the speakers from Guilford County. We don't have anything in common. In fact, there is not even a road that gets from the Congresswoman's precinct across the district. To leave her house and get into the 5th district, you have to, or into the new district, you would have to go through one of 2 other districts. The other thing that I just want to kind of address is that the one consistent thing that I see, and someone else noted earlier, was a district in Western North Carolina around the North Carolina Speaker's home. I want you guys to draw districts that have the best interest of the constituents and not just the best interest of politicians in Raleigh. What happens in my current district when Congresswoman Fox decides not to run in several years? then what do? We have 3,700 people on the far side of Watauga County. So we're just asking you to draw better districts, concise districts for the better representation of the people. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. The last individual we have signed up had contacted us beforehand because they were added to the wrong list, so we will recognize them here and remove them from the list for the virtual meeting, and that is Keith Graham, who is apparently on site in Wilmington, where he thought he was signing up for. And so if Keith Graham is there, we'll ask that you recognize him for a time period not to exceed 2 minutes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Keith Graham. I'm a retired 22-year Air Force veteran and now a local preacher here in the Southeast region. I'd like to emphasize things that I'm sure everyone here has heard multiple times in the past 10 years. I'm asking for transparency in the redistricting process. I'm specifically asking for county clusters and communities of interest to be kept together. New Hanover County as a whole is a community of interest due to our cultural uniqueness. It does not need to be split when drawing maps. I'll also emphasize that maps should be compact and drawn with competitiveness and keep communities of interest in mind as well. I also urge legislators to keep New Hanover County intact. One of the proposed maps shows where New Hanover County has chunks taken out, possibly packing the political strength of its residents, preventing them from selecting a candidate of choice. This caused a lot of confusion for our population in the past and our family members that were voting in 2 different races. Also, some proposed maps are drawn, if adopted, will possibly put the state in the position where if it could possibly have no minority representation. This is definitely racial gerrymandering exercised with extreme prejudice. Apart from these asks, I want to highlight how disappointed people across the Southeast are to the current redistricting process. We don't have enough public hearings. These hearings are not being advertised enough, and I fear online public comments may be ignored. I feel this meeting was extremely important, and I was compelled to take off work early to drive over an hour to attend today's meeting that was held during work hours. We ask that you host meetings after hours, as you did in past years. Most concerning of all is that the public don't have enough time to make comments after maps are finalized. The people of North Carolina should be able to respond to the final maps we have.
I can't hear anything.
I understand it. I don't know if anybody at my SD saying we have low bandwidth.
To what you're doing, and we will continue to demand better from our leaders. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you for your comments. I will now go back through.
Mr. Chair.
I will now go back through the list of no-shows that are coming here to determine if individuals have shown up at their respective areas to say. Jenny Cora Lynch, here in the Legislative Auditorium. Alette Colson, here in the auditorium. Aaron Hope, signed up here in the auditorium. Evelyn Mabin Hall at Caldwell Community College. Assuming they're not still there, Senator Daniel?
Not here, Senator Heiss.
Deborah Maxwell at the New Hanover site. Bob Jones.
She is not in Wilmington.
Here at the auditorium. Michael Kelly at Caldwell.
Michael Kelly is not here, Senator Heiss.
Thank you, Senator Daniels. And William Tarpley, UNC Wilmington. Okay. That would conclude the list of individuals who have signed up to speak. We have exhausted the list, therefore exhausting the agenda of the committee. Therefore, this committee stands adjourned.